Alright, let's see how this goes. Setting up the stream. Okay, it says it's starting. It's been a while since I've done this. Hey, that's looking better. Preview's up. What's the delay looking like? Okay, that's not bad. Alright, I'm going to send the link to this to a bunch of people on Discord. Once that gets set up, we'll start the stream. I've got some interesting stuff to go over today. And I know it's been a while. It's been pretty busy in my real life, but I'll get into that in a minute. It's been long enough that I don't exactly remember how to set up find the live streaming link. Okay, 3 people watching, looks like that's starting to come up. Okay, got the link, putting it in Discord. While and what some of the down the line are. Fingers crossed that link works. Let's see how many people yell at me for using @ here. All right. Alright, I guess I will give people a few minutes to get set up. I'll probably just place down some tracks that we can play on while we're going over the stream. Most of this will not be coding. These streams, I guess, go between either coding or going over different features. Hey Dank, see in the comments, hey LC unit officer unit 97. Yeah, so I'll give it a couple minutes while people hop on. So that's not what I wanted. I need to design a much better user interface for this. Turn, let's go there, pick that. The fun part is most of the Immersive Railroading code here that you're seeing is not actually interacting with Forge in any way, shape, or form, other than through a compatibility layer. And I've got the window open so you might hear some people as they walk by. I've got a few more people online. Finish up this loop and then start going over some of the features. Alright, I've got my render distance set low for a very specific reason, which I'll be getting into. And one more piece of track. There we go. Alright, so this is actually based off of Immersive Railroading 1.5. 1.5, well, the code that I'm running now is forked off of 1.5 right before we hit 1.6. This is primarily what I've been working on for the past couple months. The main goal has been to allow the Immersive Railroading code to be completely separate from Minecraft or Forge's code and go through a compatibility layer. What this will allow is porting to almost any Minecraft version with minimal effort, once you port the base layer, any changes to immersive railroading should not, it doesn't matter what Minecraft version it's in for the most part. It'll still be, in all likelihood, a separate jar, but supporting Fabric, supporting Forge on any version should be relatively straightforward. I've tried to boil down the essence of what is actually necessary under the scenes to build immersive railroading. So it's a voxel-based game with blocks and something akin to tile entities, some sort of more advanced block, and the ability to have entities and using LWJGL. This rewrite is built in such a way that in theory you could even port to Terrasology if you were really familiar with it. For those of you who aren't familiar, Sology, I just heard about this the other day. It's a Java-based kind of Minecraft clone. But I don't know what their mod support is, but if it's Java, it's easy enough to hack. So in theory, IR could be even ported to this. So this is kind of the goal behind what I'm doing, is making this abstract enough that you can port it to almost any Java game that uses LWJGL under the scenes, under the hood. So, all right. So, as I've been going through this has given me the chance to take a deeper look at what are some of the things I could have done better initially with immersive railroading. And one of the main performance problems that people have is GPU memory. A lot of the recent updates have fixed the Minecraft memory, so even I can't actually trigger the GC, but once this goes up high enough, it'll go back down. You can run immersive railroading memory-wise within a gig or so of memory, with a big asterisk on there. That asterisk being if you're using an Intel GPU or even normal GPUs, if you start using more GPU memory than exists on your card, hang on, it's at 0, it will start using your main computer's memory. So I'm not sure how familiar people are between like your main computer's memory, your RAM, and the very similar thing that exists on your GPU. So a GPU might be marked as a Radeon's whatever, or let me pull up what I've got. So your GPU is an AMD Radeon such and such version, and mine in particular has about 2 gigs of RAM on it. And right now, because I've got a lot of other stuff open and I'm streaming, I'm using about 1.5 gigs of that. Previously, immersive railroading would use a metric ton of GPU memory, partially because of the way OpenGL is implemented, and partially because I was lazy when I initially wrote that code. This is actually for Mars Colonist. This is a Linux machine. I run Debian Linux. It's stable. It makes a good development environment. If you're ever interested in Linux and you're on a Windows or a Mac, you can download a program like VirtualBox and try out different Linux distributions in that. That's whether. No, it's toggle downfall. Man, it's been a while since I've done this stuff. Okay, let me go through some of the other comments real quick. As far as adding immersive railroading fuels, that's not really on the schedule right now. Hopefully the mod core will allow me to start making other mods and reduce the development load for immersive railroading so that I can branch out to other stuff. There's a couple plans in motion between some of the other people who work on immersive railroading to make a kind of a companion mod, but that's still in very, very early stages. So don't count. There's a dog outside. Don't count on that happening anytime soon. Hey, Andrew Boots on. Are you supposed to be at work? Just kidding. Sorry, there's a very mad dog outside. Where was I? Right, GPU memory. So this version of immersive railroading only loads what you're seeing on screen into GPU memory at a given time. Normally when I'm running this with the current packs I've loaded, which I'll show in a sec, I would be massively overloading my GPU, but as it stands right now, immersive railroading is usually only using 300 to 400 megabytes of GPU memory, which, considering what I've loaded, is not a lot. Speaking of, let me show you what I have loaded. Let's go to... That is not the button I meant to click. It's been a long day. moved to a new city, starting a new job, so a little bit tired. Okay, so if we go to options, resource packs, a lot of these, so the K5 and the CNG, those don't actually do anything at this point. Those were just testing stuff. But the IR Legacy Pack and the American Steam Locomotive Pack are both the latest versions of those. The American Steam Locomotive Pack, people have complained a lot about because it uses so much GPU memory. Now, I could blame Legend for making really large textures, but he also he does a very nice job with what he does. Yes, they could be more optimized, but I honestly feel that you could get away with a lot more if the code was more optimized, and that's what I've done. So if you take a look inside of here, you can see we've got all of these different icons. And let's say we want to place down, I guess, let's do the G3. I haven't actually seen that one. So here we have our icon. So the fun part is this is actually a two-dimensional icon. This is the first optimization I made. This right here is not actually rendering a model like it used to. For this particular window, I am rendering it to a magical frame buffer thing in OpenGL during when Minecraft is loading, and doing the equivalent of taking a screenshot of that magical area and saving that for later. So all of these icons, and some of them are not scaled correctly, so I haven't actually finished this code yet, but all of these are just rendering a square and plopping that image on top. So instead of rendering all of these as full-blown models, I'm taking a screenshot early on in the loading process and saving that as a Minecraft texture for later, which is pretty darn cool. This is the first thing that massively reduces the amount of memory you need. The next thing is when you place down a model, that is when it actually loads the texture. So you can see we've gone up to 77, 78% memory. So if I break this and we watch that, you should see in about 10 seconds it should drop off a little bit. There we go, down to 71%. So that model in particular uses about 7% of the memory, the GPU memory on my system. And I could have 20 of these and it'll still use that same 7%. It's not additive, it's just per each model type. So if you have one of every one of these placed in your world, then it might start getting back to the same problem of you're running out of GPU memory, but the base game loaded uses very little GPU memory. So I actually store on disk in this cache directory all of these different files. And like if we're looking at the peppercorn, you might be able to see some colors that correspond with the textures you might be familiar with. And there's two per each, and I'll get into that in a sec. But if I open up this, let's see. So this is Legend's texture sheet for the A1 peppercorn. So this is written to disk in its own custom location in a slightly optimized format. And this is a 4K texture, which is massive. It's part of the reason the jar is so big. It could probably be optimized a little bit more, but given the way he's modeled it, the way he works, this is what we have for now, and I want to make the code as powerful as possible to support the crazier things that the modelers come up with. That's part of the fun, is people loading aircraft carriers and strange stuff like that into immersive railroading, cathedrals on wheels. So we've got two different versions of this. We have the icon and we have the normal version. So if I have the peppercorn here, you can see there's a couple little visual artifacts. I can't actually, I can point. So this right here is a little bit there. If I toss this on the ground, it'll be a little bit more visible. Like the window texture is a little bit funky. It's not a perfect texture. So this is, let's compare the texture sizes. So this one, if I open this back up again, is about 400 by 400 pixels. This one is 4K by 4K. So it's 10 times, or it's 0.1 of the size, because it's cumulative. I mean, the image file size is 150 kilobytes versus 6.5 megabytes. It's pretty darn significant. So if we're just rendering this texture in our hand, we don't really care about all the super little details that you might want to see when you're coming in looking very closely at all of the little bits of the nameplate and things like that. But for not for icons, but for things like rotating models in world and stuff like that, you're not going to notice. So this puts a lot less load on the GPU, rendering a much simpler texture at this point. If anyone's familiar with LOD, level of detail in rendering, a lot of what I've done is similar to that. Mine is mostly texture-based and not necessarily decimating the number of triangles, because that's less of a problem at this point. So I think the best piece of rolling stock to show this with, and again, there's definitely bugs that I need to fix, but it's getting closer. So if I place this down, the FPS doesn't really drop much, which is surprising because it's actually loading 2 different images. You can't really see it there, but let me make this a little bit smaller and pull up my debug window. So this is my development environment. You can see here's all the messages that are being printed as I'm playing the game. I've got a lot of extra stuff in there that I wouldn't normally have in an actual release version. So you can see I've got these alloc messages and dealloc messages. So alloc means we need this image and we're going to pull it from disk and put it on the graphics card. Dealloc is we no longer need this image, we're not rendering anything that uses this image, we're just going to throw it away. So if we're standing here watching this, I can switch this texture. And when I switch it, it will first default to the icon texture, so watch very carefully, and I'll try and do it twice, but it'll take about 30 seconds for it to uncache this stuff. So it'll show a much simpler version of this model, or of the texture of this model, because that loads in a couple milliseconds, crazy quick. And then in the background, it will be going through and loading and processing and getting an image ready to upload to the GPU. And as soon as that's ready, it'll upload that and then switch over to the more complex texture, the one that you see right now. So watch very carefully. And you can watch the GPU memory settings spike, and then at some point it will come back down. That didn't work. That was supposed to... Interesting. That's not right. Let me try that again. Do I have another one loaded? It's deallocated. Okay, it did it that time. I'll try and do that again for people. This code is still somewhat work in progress. So if you look down here, we've deallocated the white-brown scheme, and I've got these set pretty much on a hair trigger. So I can right-click on that. You can see how it kind of shows blurry and not kind of complete, and then it snaps in. And you can see it first allocates the well, let's see. It's a lot of mess. So we allocate the object white-brown. Where's the icon? I guess the icon was already loaded. Let's do that again. Get rid of you. Okay. But in any case, you kind of get the idea. So when you're flying in from a really far distance away, you won't even see this, but as soon as it unrenders, in a minute, there we go. So it just popped out of the view. If we watch down here, it will soon show it just deallocated both of those models, or both of those textures. So as we fly back in, you can see it prints out allocation messages. And it doesn't really even drop the FPS doing so. And if we come in here and right-click, simple, complex. So in theory, I could even have multiple versions, different levels, so it loads the simple one, the medium, and then the full one to make the transition a little bit smoother, but I'm reasonably happy with this right now. But our GPU memory has not gone more than about 84%. And just to prove to you that a single instance of this only uses a fairly standard amount of memory, I'll plop down a bunch of these. Still at about 84%, 81. It's unloading some icons, which saves some memory here and there. Okay, so I've placed down a bunch of these, and it's still using that same amount of memory. But yeah, so this is what I've been working on for the past couple months, and that means that if you have 100 different versions of a coach, I know Larky has at least 100 in one of his packs. Not sure it's publicly released yet. It won't make a significant problem with the amount of memory or GPU memory allocated on your system. Yeah, so that's most of what I wanted to go over today. I was actually just super excited that any of that worked in the first place. Even this is a fairly mid-range graphics card. I've had it for a number of years, and it still was not handling immersive railroading, and that was really bothering me. But at this point, it's significantly more efficient. Oh, another thing I should talk about is this may in some cases double your FPS. I know that's a huge claim, but one of the things I was doing before was I was actually rendering all of these entities twice in some cases. The way that Minecraft renders stuff, and I can't really demonstrate it that well now because this has the bug fixed in it. But if I was standing, so let's say, can I turn? Do I have chunk boundaries? I do not have chunk boundaries. So let's say this coach lives in two different chunks because a chunk is 16 blocks. Part of the problem with Minecraft is, let me grab something different. Whatever, copper ore. So let's say the chunk goes from here. I'll just fly around and I should have done that a little bit differently. A little bit tired, can you tell? So a chunk is about that big. Let's say there's another chunk that is over here. If anyone's hit, like, I think it's either F9 or it's one of the F keys with most packs, you get a sort of interface. So this is one chunk. So if I'm not looking at this chunk, let's say I'm looking here, it's going to render this entity. But let's say the center of this is within that chunk that's sitting right there. If I'm sitting here looking over here and that chunk is not in view, so it's over here, but I can't actually see it in my viewport, Minecraft does not render it. This works fine for most Minecraft entities. The problem is immersive railroading entities need to render across multiple chunks, and you'll get some weird graphical flickering. There's still some weird graphical flickering, but that's more of a bug that I've introduced in some of the bounding box stuff that I've been fiddling with. I've actually rewritten about 10,000 lines of code to get to this point, which is kind of nuts. The next release will need a lot of testing, so if you're on the stream and you'd like to help with that testing, I would hugely appreciate if you sent me a message either in Test Notifier or sent me a PM saying you want the test notifier role. That'd be very much appreciated. We'll need as many different setups and different graphics cards and amounts of memory testing this as possible, because it's going to be a massive overhaul. Not necessarily in functionality, but the ability to run on many computers much better than it has before. Anderboot, who's in the chat, is probably the worst case scenario where he finds every single pack he can get his hands on for immersive railroading, which I think you were saying it was something like 180 pieces of stock or something like that, and he needs like 20 gigs of RAM to run immersive railroading, mostly because of GPU memory. Yeah, all the stock. This should reduce the amount of memory he uses down to maybe half a gig of GPU memory, just static. Yeah, if you've got a toaster, this will be an excellent thing for you. I have two toasters here, one that's a little bit toastier than the other. It can barely run stock Minecraft, so it's a good load test. But yeah, what else was I going to go over? As far as releasing this code to the public, if you're feeling really adventurous, you can build the project from Git on the modcore branch. It's not stable. It's not really ready for anything other than messing around in creative. So, timelines. I just started a new job, moved to a new city, so depending on how much I get out on the weekends, I'm not going to have a huge amount of time on this, so this will not be something that you'll see within the next week or two. Within the next month or two is what I hope for. I did have some time this summer to sit down when I was between jobs and get a lot of this moving, but I still have the last 15 to 20% of the project to finish. Yeah, that's not going to happen, Andrew Boot. This weekend is definitely not. I think I'm probably going on another bike ride this weekend. It's nice out. But if you're interested, keep an eye on development. I'll be posting here. And if you watch GitHub, you can see some of the developers and other random people will comment on stuff we push. So you can see, like, I've mostly been working on this. There's issues that get open, all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, just keep an eye on this. Looks like I've got a lot of stuff to respond to soon. I guess I'll probably open the floor for questions as I finish rambling and people get stuff up on the side. Or on the chat. Oh, F3G. Let's try that. Hey, there we go. Let's see, who's... That's Magi1053. Teaching me... I've learned something new every day. That is quite helpful. This is... Let's see, what's a good example? Okay, so the center of the stock is here, so it will only render if this chunk is being rendered. Going back to what I was saying earlier. So if I'm standing here, and I'm looking away from that chunk, well, that code's obviously broken. This is why it's a development stream and not released to the public yet. So as that chunk goes out of view as I turn, that piece of stock disappears completely, which really should not happen. What the heck is going on there? Okay. Oh no, it's the height, that's why. Yeah, that's just that other separate bug that I'm dealing with. Okay. But it would be similar to that. That's more that I've introduced a couple hundred bugs that I've got to squash before I can release this code. All right. Any plans for what I'm doing after this is completed? Track API doesn't really need to be fixed. It's simple. So Track API, a lot of people have a misconception about what that is. Track API is just a layer that different train mods can expose to allow them to play nicely with each other. It's really just you have a tile entity or a block, and you can say, hey, where's the next piece of track? Or rather, if I'm moving in this direction at this speed and I'm at this location, where's my next position? That's all Track API does. So, pretty simple. It may get expanded at some point to handle multiple gauges a little bit better. That code is kind of hacked together in Immersive Railroading, but of all the mods that use Track API, Immersive Railroading is the only one with multiple gauges. So there's a few out there. Let's see. Yeah, Minecraft does need to be fixed. That's part of the reason that I'm implementing this in such a crazy way as I am. So if you look at the code base, let me pull this up over here. So I've got Immersive Railroading and Mod. Mod is the layer that actually talks with either Forge or whatever mod loader I'm using, and Minecraft directly. Immersive Railroading only has a few Minecraft imports. So let's say we look at blocks. So block rail. Well, this is a bad example. Block rail base. Here we go. If we look at our imports, we're actually not importing anything Minecraft here. Same thing with tile entities. That took quite a lot of time. Same thing with fluids. I built my own fluid system, power system, all sorts of stuff that can be built on top of any other mod or any other system and does not tie back to Minecraft or Forge. This one still has a few little artifacts here and there, so as I said, I'm about 15 to 20% left. At the point where I've got 15 to 20% left. But like rail base right here, this one, I think... Oop, I gotta remove that. This doesn't have a single Minecraft import in it, which took a crazy amount of work. I can pull up a diff of how many lines I've changed. Oh, this is a tool. One of the reasons I like running Linux is I've got this tool. I've got this tool that I can see how much memory I'm using. Sorry, there's someone walking by and talking in the background. And seeing where it's using most of my GPU processing different stuff. So if I do let's see if I remember the command git diff. There's C main Java. So if I diff it against master, let's do summary. Got the status. Okay. 285 files changed, 12,000 insertions, and about 10,000 deletions. Yeah. That's the scale of changes. And immersive railroading overall, if I do main Java 10 cat, is that gonna do it? Yep. Type file word count long. Right. This goes back here. Okay, so immersive railroading at this point is almost 30,000 lines of code. So changing 10,000 lines out of 30,000 is nothing to sneeze at. So this will, again, this is why if you can send me a message and ask about being a test notifier, all it really entails is getting a ping when I am ready for people to really hop on and start grinding away at a new version and trying to find bugs. Okay, let me go through the what's on the list. Oh, you getting back to XV Oracle. Do you have any plans for what you're doing after this is completed? One of the things that I've wrapped into this was the GPU optimization. That's been on my list for a long time. Probably either working on making smaller versions of the machines or getting into the electric code. I'm not entirely sure which. Both of those I've kind of fiddled with a little bit, but they're still very much a twinkle in a developer's eye. Let's see. Railroad crossings. Grade crossing. It's there. Let's see. What are on the list of things to do? Where on the list of things to do is alternate parts. That should, I mean, you could probably implement that similar to the way that we implement dynamic loads. But I don't know, to be honest. It would be interesting. Actual code-wise, it shouldn't be that bad. A lot of the immersive railroading development should get a lot simpler now that all the insanity that is Forge and Minecraft is abstracted away into kind of its own little bundle that the main code doesn't have to care as much about. Yeah, can I make Larky release this pack? No. I can send him more cookies, though. I forget why I sent him cookies at one point, but I actually mailed him cookies. Let's see. Make the bottle not pink now. Yeah, I mean, it's at some point if, let's say, worst case scenario, Minecraft says, we're no longer running the Minecraft Java auth servers. Someone could port this to Terrasology or build a similar voxel-based game that immersive railroading could be compatible with. The code really, at the end of the day, will not be dependent on anything specific to immersive railroading or Forge, which has just been a massive undertaking overall. Yeah, soon TM. The hardest part about electrics, and I've talked about this in the past, is when you're transmitting power over 100 kilometers. or even a couple kilometers, you can't keep all those chunks loaded. You can't iterate along the track using just a simple following algorithm. What you need to do is store a map of track outside the world data that can be iterated through without having the chunks loaded. So you can, let's say I've got a train, let's say we've got an electric train here, and we've got a power substation 5 kilometers that way just on straight track. I can't load that 5 kilometers between. I need to be able to iterate through the track path without actually loading those chunks and saying, hey, we've got a chunk loaded there. Is there power there? Hey, there is. Let's pull power from that. And things like that. I've got a very, very basic proof of concept of that, but that's about it for electrics. Though technically that was kind of the hardest part. Implementing a proper what's the word I'm looking for? It's not transform graph, traversal algorithm will be a little bit tricky, but that shouldn't be that bad. Anything change with the port to 1.14, 1.13? Yeah, this is kind of what I was going over with ModCore. As soon as I get ModCore working, one of the first things I'm doing is porting to 1.7.10 and to 1.14, just for fun. And they're so drastically different from each other, it will be a very good test to make sure that I've written the abstraction in a clean enough way that it doesn't matter what loader or really voxel-based Java game you're hooking into. Buffers. At some point, there's actually a pull request open that I want to get in. Actually, that's a good thing that's coming next, is after ModCore. Let me pull up the pull requests. I have way too many tabs open. Pull requests. There's a lot of stuff in here, some of which are changes requested, some of which are pretty close. Let's see. This one, train collisions with blocks. This is well done. I need to actually go through and help get this ready for merge. This is a massive improvement with how the pathing works and how it interacts with the world. Cab cars, I need to get... A lot of these are on a slightly lower priority that I need to get back into. Let's see, I got to work with Thomas on that. This one will be fun if there's a nice GUI that goes along with it to help positioning. This one needs to go in redstone control for loader, unloader augments. That will make building certain automation a lot easier. Tool for exchanging tracks, new model. These are waiting on ModCore. A lot of these are waiting on ModCore. I'd like to apologize to all the developers that are that have been waiting on me for... That one's almost been a year. That one's been over half a year. So I need to get back to that. This ModCore, I've been fighting with this for quite some time. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this will make implementing buffers probably a lot easier, if I had to guess, given how that's written. It actually takes the block collisions into account when it's calculating the movement of the train. Yep. Fluid handling in 1.14. I'm not sure, but I abstracted away enough that I can just wrap whatever they expose. It'll probably depend on if I port to Forge or Fabric for 1.14. If I was really feeling motivated, I could do both. Because the immersive railroading code behind the scenes won't actually change. It's just that ModCore abstraction. And I may use ModCore to write other mods as well, because it's actually quite nice. A lot of stuff from immersive railroading has moved into ModCore. Sorry, I just uncoupled my headphones. So we've got a fluid library, entity library, energy library. A lot of these, let's do a simple example like math. So you would think that like a vector, for those of you who haven't taken that math yet. So if you throw a ball in a direction, that dimension, so the x, y, and z of what you throw, that's your vector. So the vec3 I and vector d. An integer is just a flat number. D is a double, which has, like, you can have a decimal there. It's an easy way to remember that. So this is where we coupled in with, depending on what Minecraft version or loader we're using, this is where it hooks into that. So we have an internal block pose. Now block pose is a Minecraft construct, but only for newer versions. Older versions of Minecraft do not have this in this particular way. So this exposes a bunch of functions that I can use in my code that do not depend on this block pose. So anytime immersive railroading, so let's say you fire an event where a player clicks on a block, that gets a block pose. But I don't want to use a block pose in my code, I want to use a vec3i. I expose something very similar that wraps this idea, this construct of a block pose, but doesn't actually interact with it directly. So let's say we go to 1.2.5, just throwing out a crazy example there. They didn't have this construct. You would actually pass in the x, the y, and the z as three different things, and then use those in that functionality. I can transform it as I need to, as the code is running, into my own construct, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if I'm going too technical or not. Let's see. Can I port Minecraft to 1.0.0? Depends on if Forge still functions, or some sort of mod loader functions on that. And the nice part is, let's say that fluids don't work on that version. Well, I can disable fluid handling for that version, or energy, or whatever. Like I could change the energy abstraction to say, well, just ignore energy, don't require energy on any machines, and let it work. Let's see. I'll get to you in a sec. Thought about removing the warm-up for diesels. Flamer Gamer, yes. So I'll probably be working with Krieg Fox on that a little bit sometime before 2.0. He actually plays with and runs diesels on a semi-regular basis, so he's got a better idea of implementing some sort of balance there. Yeah, you can change the warm-up speed and things like that. Yeah. So my main goal is to make a lot of immersive railroading as configurable as possible so that people can tune it for the different playstyles. A lot of people are looking for just a fairly simple sandbox game. Some people are looking for, I need to replace the driver every 5,000 miles or whatever. I need to put oil in. I need to, if I go around a turn too big, or turn this too tight, I'm going to derail all this stuff. So immersive railroading config is big and complex, and if it's hard to understand, I apologize. I have not rewritten the config system yet to work with ModCore, so that may include some nice new functionality there that I'm not entirely sure about yet. So keep an eye on that space. Okay, back to Wrong Weekend's question. How does the new cache code palette and Blender textures? So the way this works, let me look at a good example. So, gondola. Here we go. So here's a caboose texture. So when you're working with OpenGL, if you want to be efficient, you really only want to bind one image. The way that Minecraft does this is they have a texture atlas or a texture sheet. For those of you who have dug into any of that with Minecraft. Looks like someone included a reference to the source for that image there. So in the resource pack, it includes these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 distinct images. But with OpenGL, I only want to use a single image when I'm actually drawing the object. So what I do is I take the image and I combine it into this. And I could write a more efficient packing algorithm. But that's some really fun math that I don't really want to get into at this point. You can see a similar thing with, this is the caboose. A lot of these are flat textures, but you actually, no, these aren't flat textures. These are fuzzy stuff like that. So this right here is another example where the actual image itself is only going to be one little blip up here, one little square, but it's repeated a couple hundred times, which means that the zip is smaller. and it uses some tricks in OpenGL to have that actually work. If I'm rendering it on a single image, I need to hack it so it's it actually enumerates it as expected. I've given some other talks. There's I think a LimboCon or something like that talk that I gave a little while ago. That's posted in announcements going back a while. Here we go, this talk right here. So if you scroll up in announcements, the LimboCon talk, I go over some of how that works in a little bit more detail. But at the end of the day, I have a single image that I'm drawing for every object. One compressed, or one smaller version, one bigger version. And on the fly, what's happening, let's say let's switch this over. And let's do toggle downfall times set 0. I do that. That loads pretty quickly. That may already be cached. Do we have... There's got to be some other stuff that has texture variants in here. Does anyone know off the top of their head? T1... Class 38? I don't think so. Nope, that's just... I should add a tooltip that helps with that. Let me... Not sure it's still in the logs here. Ah, the tender. That's one that I can show. That I'm not sure how big that is. Yeah, that doesn't really show it well. For the smaller textures, it doesn't matter quite as much. And because I've already got this train here, you won't really be able to see it. But if I were to go through and break all of these... Dum-da-dum. Oh, the A5 is 2 variants. Let me try that. Way. I can't type 5. Oh. There we go, A5. Got this one, and if we right click, that's actually pretty snappy. I mean, I've optimized this process quite a bit. But as it's loading these, it first loads the simple one, then loads the more complex one. I may remove some of that code if the texture is small enough. But going back to the example that actually works, if I get rid of these, and I place... Let's get back over here, grab you, and check that it's probably been deallocated by now. Up over here. Place, and bye cow. So as it switches over, it goes to the simpler texture because it loads quickly and then goes to the more complex texture. Which I'm pretty happy with. I may have gone on a tangent and forgotten what I was talking about. Long day. Shader specific handling of the IR stock, bumps, claws, metallic maps. Yeah. I'd like to do that. That's a lot of work. This actually does open up the possibility for that, though. Whereas we were really hitting the GPU memory on a pretty regular basis. This gives us a little bit more wiggle room to add things like a bump map. But that means I have to write a shader and do all sorts of other fun stuff, so eventually. And hopefully the simpler code will allow other people to hop on and give it a try. Yeah, like a real LED system. Yep. Oh yeah, planning on the simpler textures at a distance. Yeah, that's definitely on my to-do list. That's actually pretty straightforward, I think. That would actually... Well, who wants to do a demo of coding? Let me let's see, what change do I have? Okay, because I want that back in. That was just some debug that I've got in there. So let's implement a semi-real LOD system now that we've got the basics in place. Tile, util. Alright, so we go to Immersive Railroading, Render, Entity. Nope. Yeah, stock model. Okay. So here's the function that actually draws the rolling stock. So here's our text, and here's our bind texture. And there's a icon parameter. Ooh, this will be interesting. This, let's see. I guess it's the Minecraft client. So I'm going to do a hack, and this may or may not work. So we could do Minecraft client get player dot no. What did I call that? This is an abstraction I want to use. Maybe player? Ooh. No, registry player. Util. Oh, here we go, Minecraft client. This is what I want. Okay. I've rewritten so much stuff that I lose track a little bit. Once it sinks in for a bit, it should be fine. Okay. Minecraft client dot get player get position. Or no, that's not what I want. No, sorry, that is what. Sorry, I need to be done with this soon and start again on another day when I'm a little bit more awake. So we've got our player. We can get. Let's get our position dot distance to stock is greater than. Let's just do 10 blocks so it's easy to see. Stock dot get position. So we'll do Boolean is nearby equals this. So we can say, so we've got our player, we're getting the player's position, and we're calculating the distance to the stock's position. And if it's if it's less than 10, then it's nearby. There we go. So we go down to our bind texture, and we can pass in not is nearby. So that will say if it's far away, use the icon. Let's rename this to is far away. Get rid of the negation and change this back to greater. So is far away will be set to true if it's further than 10 blocks away. If it's less than 10 blocks away, it'll be near, so that'll be false. So let's just give this a try right here. Save and quit. Quit game. And boot it back up. This will take a minute because I've got a pretty big pack loaded up. This will give you an idea about how much slower it will be to load Immersive Railroading with these changes. I do want to add some caching in. I might work on that in the next day or two. So if it already generates the image on the first load, it won't spend as much time on the subsequent ones. So you load up the first time, it's slow. Every time after that, it's a little bit quicker. So loading models, that hasn't changed. Generating height maps, which it'll get to in a minute. I wonder if I can get the pack name from that. I'd need to change a lot of code to do that, though. Height maps, that hasn't changed. Go. This is all standard Minecraft stuff. Okay. Here we go. So this is not actually that bad. This is faster than generating on a slow computer with 2D icons. I'll probably try and speed it up a little bit more at some point, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to hit hard drive or CPU bottlenecks. But fingers crossed that this works. Dum-da-dum. Almost there. There we go. Fingers crossed this works because I don't want to have to boot up Minecraft again on the stream. I might remove Legends Pack just for the sake of time if this doesn't work. Yeah, I have to remember how smooth shading in OpenGL works. Alright, let's do... This is really obvious if it's going to be... So near, far, near, far, near, a little bit closer, far. There we go. So that is a somewhat exaggerated LOD system. That's not bad at all. Boop. Boop. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. But if you could imagine that if you're this far away, or, well, let's call it 100 blocks, you're not really going to notice too much zooming in and having it pop a little bit. XV Oracle's asking about having mesh changes when you zoom in. That would probably be overkill at this point. I'm not sure there's a good way to do that. There are ways of decimating meshes, but I'm already trying to cram so much into the Immersive Railroading startup that it's problematic. And there's not a ton of triangles here. The bigger bottlenecks have definitely been GPU texture sizes. So. Yeah. Yeah, the mesh rendering's about as fast as I could reasonably make it without doing some stuff in C and stuff like that. And even then it probably wouldn't be that much faster. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. And yeah, so the center of the car is right here, so if I go to the end of the car, it'll actually unload the LOD, or unload the high res texture. Come back here. So we'll show that, let's go back to here, go back to here. Yeah, I'll probably wrap up in the next couple minutes, so yeah, ask the rest of your questions now. Alright, so we've deallocated this, the full-size image here. So if I zoom in, so we see all these defer messages. So this is some debug in my code saying, hey, we're loading. It actually tries to load the image on a separate thread. So if you've got even a 2-core CPU, it'll be faster and won't actually lag your game when it's loading the more complex textures. So we defer for maybe like half a frame there. It's not even a second. But if I didn't have that, the game would pause for half a second as it was loading the more complex LOD, if it's been deallocated. Okay, at this point I think I'm just going to do more questions from the audience and then wrap up for the night. Okay, off topic. Electric system have a differentiation between electrified and non-electrified rail. Yes. And presumably we'd use the track switcher or an upgrade kit sort of thing to add electric capabilities to existing track. I have not fleshed any of that out, but it would be a some sort of add-on for the track. Let's see, duplicate textures. Let's see, duplicate textures, for example, library 12 and 13 have one shared texture, but have a different one, and I see what you're saying. I don't know of a good way of doing that with the way it's currently structured, without making it super super crazy. I'm trying to think here for a sec. Yeah, the way I've implemented that, the way I've implemented it is not conducive to doing something like that. Yeah, sorry. Okay, setting. So Dark Director Advance is asking about a setting to change the resolution of the textures. That is something I'll be adding. I'll probably have a similar system where you say, if a texture is bigger than this size, I want you to scale it down a little bit, so even the high resolution textures are a little bit lower on my system. The icons I'll probably still be about the same, but for like my really crappy laptop that I've got my feet up on at this point, that would probably still not be happy with 4K textures. Hello there, Mr. Cow. So kind of a max texture size and a scale factor would probably be exposed. But it won't need to be cranked down as much as it is right now. Right now, to get it to load on that laptop, I've got to crank the settings way, way down for anything to happen. Or for it to load to even the main screen. But yeah, so that's where we're at right now. So could you make two engines sync up, like for instance, cab cars can control engines? Yeah, so diesels currently have synchronized throttles, and I think that's enabled by default. Some modelers can disable that if it's a certain era locomotive. And let's see, the cab car branch definitely already has that functionality in there. Let's see, what do you need to know about a mod before you can make add-ons for it? So that's Chalix's question. Depends on what the mod does and what the add-on is. Making a resource pack for immersive railroading. We need to have an actual tutorial put together. I've got to work with that. I've got to work with the modelers on that. But getting some of these features stable has been taking priority over that. But as far as adding stuff to immersive railroading, it shouldn't be that bad. Take a look at some of the existing resource packs and zip files. As far as creating an add-on similar to the Rail Stuffs mod or the Signals mod that I don't quite remember what it's called. Immersive Signals, maybe? That takes quite a bit more effort, getting set up with Java code, linking jars incorrectly, setting up forged dependencies, stuff like that. So it depends on what sort of skill you're thinking of. And Timothy Banks says, heyo. Heyo, back at you. Let's see. When you have time, could you make a tutorial video on how to use the train control card? I can't find that information anywhere, and the tutorials you put on the site is a bit vague. That is true. That is a fairly new feature that is not enabled by default for a bunch of stuff. That should be something we have a dedicated wiki page on. Actually, if you want to create a ticket for creating a wiki page for that, I'd appreciate that. If you just go to GitHub, creating an account is pretty simple. You just need an email address. And writing up kind of what you'd be looking for as far as a wiki page for the train control card. Some of the questions you've got that we can try and answer when we get to writing that up. Let's see. What I might recommend is taking a look in the release notes and seeing what developer worked on that, and pinging them in the either development channel or sending them a PM. The friendlier, the more likely they are to respond. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna sign off for the night. Been streaming about an hour. Keep an eye on GitHub. I'll be pushing more stuff to ModCore. There will be a lot of hullabaloo on the Discord channel when I get ModCore merged into the main into Immersive Railroading Master, so that it's actually part of the regular test builds. I still have to fix the Jenkins server for that. Yep, yeah, Timothy, you missed the stream. But this will be recorded, and you can play back the whole thing. And as always, ping me on Discord if you've got questions. I'll try and get back to you when I've got time. I do have a day job and a life outside of this, but I do try and spend as much time as I can spare on this project throughout the week. So thanks everyone who came and asked questions and had a good time. So signing off for today. See you in the next one.